Friday, and then it was going to be done this weekend, and
I think we're on.
we are. It wasn't. It wasn't done. So, part's going to be in on Thursday.
Cool. Hi.
Yep.
We're just talking about car repairs.
We are fun. The joys of hardships, situations and circumstances, and hardships and realities of life.
Are those things supposed to not define us or something?
I'm supposed to be joyful.
That was a different week,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
But I'm supposed to be joyful. I'm supposed to pray, and I'm supposed to give thanks in all things.
Well, that's in Philippians, though. We're in Ephesians.
Yeah. In 1 Thessalonians. So I think that's why my throat is aching, because of the house situation as well. Anyway, but no one's even watching, so we can say and do whatever we want. So yeah, anyway, it's Tuesday Q&A, 11:15. Answer thoughts, questions, concerns, and when we don't get one, we just do this. So, so you spoke this week,
Yeah.
gave the message from 1 Timothy chapter 3 on leaders. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I think kind of the big idea was just how God uses leadership to overcome our tendency toward chaos. I use the idea of entropy. Kind of in the physical world, we can see it pretty easily. You just look at any kid's bedroom or my desk or my house. Things tend toward disorder unless there is some intention and some action to reorder them. And groups of people are no different. Any group of people will tend toward disorder unless there's someone in the group or some people within the group that are acting to reestablish and maybe redefine even order. So we talked about what that looks like a little bit in the church, because that's kind of where Timothy was, and what Paul was instructing him to do was really to maintain some order.
Yeah.
Their church, their city seemed to be in, at least spiritually speaking, chaos.
Yeah.
And in 3:15, Paul wrote that I'm writing this. I'm hoping to come to you, but in case I don't, I'm writing this to you now so that you'll know how people should behave in the church. Here is how order should be in the church. And it's interesting, there's several places in the New Testament where that seemed to be a pretty important thing for Paul, that things were done in the church in an orderly way. He even went so far as to say that God's not a God of disorder, but of order. And sometimes we, at least for me, like growing up, people always somehow gave me the idea that had to do with what happens on a Sunday morning, which it does, but it's not only on a Sunday morning that he was concerned with. This wasn't a order of service type of issue. This was, how are your lives ordered? What are your patterns of living that either are leading people in the church and out of the church toward chaos, or leading people in the church and out of the church toward Christ? So, and I think God uses leadership to bring groups to order.
Yeah.
So, and that's important in the church, apparently.
Apparently. It's funny because we didn't talk about any of that.
Nope.
Just before we...
That was all pre.
Yeah, it's in while you were talking. The phrase that I used over the past couple weeks was what Warren Wiersbe described. He said it was a circus. He said that church in Ephesus was a circus. So as you're talking about that, bringing order to that chaos, I thought of, I was just thinking of like that movie, The World's Greatest Showman, and the purpose of a ringleader in that scenario is like,
Even a circus needs order.
yeah, and but like the interesting thing is, I think if you were to look, like if you were to step back from what was going on under the big, have you ever been to a circus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't
been
tell
a
my
while.
kids though, because
They're not nearly as cool as you think they were. Well, I'm thinking like if you were to look at a circus like from a 30,000 foot view, it would seem very chaotic, but there was still an order, like there was an orderliness to it
yeah,
because of what that ringleader, he was bringing order. He was now, now look over here and now look over there, like trying to draw their attention from all of these different things.
yeah, it's interesting. I think of what would a circus look like without the ringleader.
It might look the same,
Maybe.
but like when they're moving, but when they're moving animals or people into one area, like there's, hey, go
Yeah.
now look over there, so you don't see kind of that moment. Like, and I even think like I've been to school plays, like when I go to a school play, like the people who move the stage, like they're wearing dark
Yeah.
clothing, so they don't detract from the main, whatever that main event is or that main thing
Yeah.
that's taking place. And then you just said, and what I wrote down, so chapter 3 verses 1 to 13 in those instructions about church leadership, that's like how to have an ordered life.
Yeah.
How to bring order to that chaos.
Yeah. And really, I think when we think of church, we need to think of our daily lives. Being a part of the church is not showing up a couple times a week. Being a part of the church is how I represent Christ in the world every day of my life. And so there are ways for my life to be ordered that represent him well, and there are ways for my life to be ordered that don't represent Christ well. And I think in the church we need to be careful that our priorities, the way we spend our time, the way we spend our money, which is what we're talking about Wednesday night with the students. So all of that says a lot about who Jesus is to us. So, and I think we need to order our lives around him and his purposes and the mission that he has for the church. And we live in a world that teaches us to order our lives around a lot of other things. So that's always a constant, it's an area where we have to push back against the norms of society, I think, and the entropy that the norms bring.
Even if it doesn't seem like entropy, it's still like it still
Right.
is.
Yeah.
And I think that's back to that circus imagery of it may seem like it's ordered, but it's chaos, and it only becomes ordered when a leader comes in, or leaders, or a person with authority or serving
Yeah.
brings that order and shapes that what's happening.
Yeah. I think of, and I didn't talk about it a lot on Sunday, but the book of Judges is a great picture of a world that none of us would want to live in.
Right. You said that like 3 times, and I really enjoyed that phrase.
Yeah. The result of everyone doing what was right in their own eyes is chaos.
Yeah.
And that is not what we want. We want to know where boundaries are. I see this a lot with my wife with little kids, and she does a great job with babies, infants, toddlers, helping them understand boundaries. And as much as we want to push against boundaries, especially as we're growing up, we also want to know that there are boundaries to push against, because there's some security in that. And I've seen time and time again where Luann has set boundaries and been consistent with those boundaries, and little kids love it. They love her because of that security that they find in that. And I think we're like that. We need boundaries.
Yeah.
Even though we feel like I should be able to live without boundaries. I should be able to do what I want. I deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? Why do we think we deserve anything?
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about like basic human rights or anything like that, but when my life is all about what I want, that's going to cause chaos for the people around me.
Yeah.
And when everyone's life is about what they want, that's going to cause chaos for everyone around everyone. And that's pretty much everyone. So
Yeah,
living our lives that way is not going to work out the way we think it is. Freedom is not the freedom that Christ died for us to have is not anarchy. It's not the same thing. And
I like that you brought Judges into that and you talked about that phrase because I think it's 3 or 4 times throughout that book. And I remember I've had conversations with people before. I think there are some people that like look into Scripture, like when Christians talk about things, the Bible says this or the Bible says that. I think there are people kind of who look into Scripture and they might pull a book like Judges and say, "Oh, so is that how?" Like, well, the people were doing this, so does that honor God? And like going back to that context piece. Well, no, the context is they did whatever they wanted.
yeah.
So that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing just because something is in the Bible doesn't mean we have like permission to do it. Like,
Yeah.
So look at Solomon's example of all of his wives and the crazy things that David did. And like I said 2 weeks ago, if Samson were alive today, if we could catch him, he'd be in jail. Like that's the to use everyone in the Bible as a positive example. We want to be careful with that.
Right.
So remembering that that's a world where everyone does whatever they want, that helps us frame up what's happening in the book of Judges as a for instance.
Yeah.
And
I would say the same thing about how we interact with people. How we interact with people in the way we have technology today. We can have we feel like we have some sort of relationship with people that we really don't have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And we can really make idols out of them by using them as examples. I think of recent like conversion type stories like Kanye or Justin Bieber, who had a really good explanation this last week.
Yeah.
That you posted, I think, Alicia.
I did.
I'm
not really a believer, but
I think the recent news from other people that have been on a pedestal, like we put people in the Bible and people in contemporary culture up on a pedestal that no one belongs on.
Right. Moses,
for example, was a great leader, but he did some incredibly stupid things that we should not emulate.
Yeah.
We have people. I saw some articles this last week. There have been people that kind of internet famous type of people doing podcasts and video stuff. I saw another from a guy that was a very well-known worship pastor, who's written a lot of music that a lot of churches sing, that have essentially, like both him and these other guys, have deconstructed their faith and decided, I'm not a Christian anymore. That doesn't shake my faith at all. It makes me very sad for them. It makes me hope that they have people around them who can love them anyway. And possibly love them back into their faith. But it doesn't change my faith because I haven't put those people on a pedestal. But I know a lot of people that, like somebody, I'm trying to not use names.
That's
Maybe
good because you're getting into my sermon on Sunday.
Okay, I won't go too far then.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
We can't put people up on a pedestal just because they're famous.
Yeah.
And say, this is what my faith is too. Like, my faith is not more valid because Kanye comes out and says, I'm a Christian now.
Right.
My faith is what it has been, and hopefully it's growing beyond what it once was. But it really doesn't change a blip when somebody famous steps up and says, I believe in Jesus now. And that's awesome. It's great for them, and it's exciting. And it excites me to think of the platform that they have that they can now use to share Christ. And I think Paul might have wrestled with a little bit of this with people. Some of his statements about people preaching Christ out of a wrong motive.
Yeah.
He says, I rejoice anyway because Christ is being preached. And I think the way we interact with celebrity culture, the way we interact with leaders, the way we interact and think of like the famous people of Scripture, we need to be careful to acknowledge and honor what is honorable, reject what is in their life that is not honorable or godly without rejecting them, and emulate what's worth emulating. I think that really, to me, that as we read through chapter 3 and Paul kind of describes this is what people who want to be leaders in the church should be like, those are all characteristics that everyone should want to be like.
Yeah, and I really like the way you talked about that. Like, I think a few times you also said something like, aren't these the kind of people you just want to be around?
Yeah.
Like, isn't this who you want to hang out with? And in the, like, if you were, well, I have it right here. I think I have it right. Oh, that's the wrong one. This one. All of our covers look the same, so I get thrown off. Yeah, like, no, I didn't. Okay. Nope, I didn't put it on here. But like, when I've talked about chapter 3 before, very similarly, like, aren't these characteristics that we all want to be? And you did a great job in talking about that. Like, this is, whether we are aspiring to be a church leader or not, as a Christian, like, if you're looking for a list, and what I love about Paul is he says there is no list, and then he gives you a list. We talked about that last semester. I taught church or leadership in the church class at Summit, and we talked a lot about how Paul doesn't like lists, but then here's a list.
Uh-huh.
And the interesting thing about Paul's lists is very frequently they're character traits versus things I do, which is a very big counter to the way the world does lists. So yeah, I mean, these characteristics and these character traits are something that as a Christian I ought to look at that and be like, yeah, that's what I want to be too, whether I'm a leader or not.
Yeah, I think these are values that we all can aspire to. And Paul is kind of saying for those that aspire to leadership in the church, these are some characteristics that you should have already been displaying in your life.
Yeah.
It's not that these things make you a great leader or these things even... I want to be careful here because we actually use this language. Paul doesn't say these things qualify you to be a leader.
Right.
He says these things should be evident in your life, which we then take and make into a list of qualifications.
Right.
And again, they're more than that. I think they really are a picture of the kind of person that leads, whether they have a position or not.
Yeah.
Because as you read through, especially I think verse 2 through 7, that's where he talks about the elders. And as you read through those and think of people that fit those descriptions, you're probably thinking of people that you're willing to follow. You might be thinking of people that you already do follow. Mm-hmm. Because those are the kind of people who the rest of us will naturally desire to follow. We don't necessarily want to follow someone whose life is shipwrecked. We want to follow people who seem like they're going somewhere worth going.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say, since you talked a second ago about kind of our leadership process, when we think about elders here at WestWay Christian Church, it's not that's not a training ground. That's like someone doesn't become an elder and now I have to start doing these things.
Yeah.
I know because like we saw all of the nominations. That's kind of our process here, is when someone gets nominated for an elder, like we see all of those nominations, and this past season for the elder nomination process, we asked people to reveal to us why are you nominating this person, and in every instance they didn't use maybe the same words that Paul is using here in 1 Timothy chapter 3.
Right.
But we saw elements of what that says in what people wrote down and how they responded. So like if someone is if someone is not exercising self-control, they're not going to become an elder and then they're going to start doing that.
Right.
That we want to see that evidence in their life now. And so when I think on our elder nomination process, and I want to get out of this because this wasn't the purpose of this message or this, but like who do you see demonstrating these character traits?
Yeah.
If you're going to write someone's name down, it's someone who's demonstrating these character traits. And if they're not demonstrating these character traits, then don't write their name down.
Yeah. I think for us it seemed like when somebody becomes an elder here, it's an acknowledgement of the way they're already leading.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, more so than a codifying of this person is in an official position of leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we need leaders because our desire is to do whatever we want, and that
we're going to tend toward chaos,
Yeah.
and leaders will help us avoid that.
Yeah, and these are characteristics that, as believers, we all ought to be in pursuit of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of us, people watching us, some of us will then take these same character traits that they're already living out and possibly have a role of bringing that chaos into order.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way, at least maybe the way I intended to say it on Sunday, was that some of us God will use as leaders to, like, we can participate.
Yeah.
And really, all of us
Yeah, you did talk
can
well about that.
participate in how God brings beauty and order out of the chaos that we live in. You may or may not think of yourself as a leader, but you can participate, whether you do or not, in God bringing about order out of chaos. Some of that might be how you respond to and support the leaders around you. I didn't talk about it a lot, but the way you pray for our elders and our leaders here at WestWay makes an incredible difference to them and to the whole body. The way you support our leadership will either feed the chaos or feed the beauty and order that God is creating.
I'm flipping ahead into 1 and 2 Timothy.
There's more to come.
But yeah, that's right. Being supportive of leadership is an aspect of bringing order.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna ask you, because you said we can participate. I was gonna ask you that, but I think that's one way, is being supportive of leadership as they bring order to the chaos, not causing more chaos. Like we have 3 kids, and we have 4 grandkids, and like it's been interesting especially for our two oldest grandkids. Grayson's 4.5. Owen is 2.5, I think. Yeah, 2 or 3. He's 3. When we were in Oklahoma this past December, we could see them, like, when our daughter Katie was with one of them, the other one could see that it was an opportunity to bring chaos. Because Katie's trying to bring order, and she's bringing order to Grayson's world, and Owen knows that this is an opportunity for me to go crazy, do whatever he wants, and bring chaos.
Yeah.
And I've been around adults enough that there are adults who are quite adept at that same skill set of, hey, I see order taking place over here, so this is an opportunity for me to bring some chaos in. And I know that's like a really lousy view of humanity, but
Well, and I think there are some times when people desire to cause chaos and dissension, and Paul warns about that.
Mhm.
That was a big part of what was going on in this church in Ephesus, what he was writing Timothy about. There were people that were intentionally causing problems. But I think more often than that is people are maybe jealous of the attention that somebody else is getting. And so I know if I cause a little chaos over here on the side, that I will get some attention. And what I really want is not the chaos. What I really want is the attention.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a slightly less cynical
benefit
of the doubt.
So I'll even go. So now I'll put a little water into my cup half empty, and try and get it a little fuller. I mean, this is what you talked about, and this is how we would describe humanity. If our bent is towards chaos, I don't have to intentionally try to cause chaos in order to cause chaos. Like, I
just do what I do.
It's just me. It's just my normal life, in the way that I normally function as a person who's being made more and more into Christ's image. Like, there's still those pieces of my former life that are deeply rooted in my soul.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to cause chaos. Like, our daughter's birthday was yesterday, and what she got for her birthday was a new toilet at their house. And she got a new toilet at their house because Owen stuffed a toy down into it, and it was so well wedged in there that they couldn't get it out. So they had to replace the entire toilet.
That's a pretty exciting birthday.
Yep. I was like, welcome to adulthood. I mean, as a 3-year-old, I think you could make a lot of arguments. He's probably just being a 3-year-old.
Right.
Putting a toy down the toilet.
Hey, I wonder what happens if...
Yeah. So that's an example of humanity being humanity, and I'm going to put this toy down this toilet, and chaos ensues.
Yeah.
And that happens. I do that. You do that. People, we just do that because we're not who God is making us to be yet.
Yeah.
So we're going to cause chaos, intentionally or it's nice when it's unintentional. Well, it's never nice, but it's nice when it's unintentional, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else to add?
Well, I already talked for 35 minutes on Sunday morning.
You did, man.
There's definitely more. There's a lot in this passage that we can spend a lot of time unpacking. I was challenged, especially with just that first verse. This is a trustworthy saying. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. I wanted to look at that word aspires and kind of dig into that a little bit, because it's not necessarily a word that we use a lot. And so I pulled out my Greek New Testament and pulled out a lexicon, and I started looking up. There's 10 words in that verse, and I looked them all up, and just digging through those really was challenging for me in some of my own thought processes and the chaos that I've become comfortable with enough that you don't notice it as being chaos anymore. But the putting side by side aspiration and humility, I think, is pretty key for me. I think there have been times when I have shied away from aspiration, like it's something that we shouldn't, like we should just be humble.
Right.
And I even talking about this, I'm really careful about how I say it,
right,
because we should be humble. But I think God also plants in us desires and dreams that we should aspire to, and we should strive for those things. The word that Paul uses here is the same word that he uses other places when he talks about lust, in an inappropriate way. But it's also the same word that Jesus used when he talked about the Last Supper. When he sat down at the Last Supper with his disciples, he used that very same Greek word. Actually, maybe used the Aramaic, but the same word to describe, this is what I really, really want. This is what I've longed for. This is what I've been striving for and reaching after, is to share this meal with you, to commemorate and sort of lead into the sacrifice that I'm about to make, so that all of you can be one with my Father the way that I am. The thing I said on Sunday was that our aspirations have to be incubated in humility, the way that Jesus was. I love the verse in Philippians that Paul advocates us having the same attitude that Jesus had. And then he describes the ultimate humility. Jesus had nothing to aspire to. He was sitting at the right hand of God. And then he emptied himself. He let go of all of that and set that aside so that he could become one of us, so that he could rescue us. That's what Jesus aspired to. And because Jesus because Jesus had the humility to do that, I almost said humilified. That might be a fun word. Because he had that humility, God then lifted him back up and restored him to the position that was his. I think if we will similarly humble ourselves, give ourselves with the intent to serve, give ourselves to the intent to serve him, he will lift us to whatever position he wants us to be in. And we don't need to worry about that. But that also entails recognizing when God is moving us positionally or authoritatively in someone else's life. I have always been kind of the sort of the reluctant leader, I guess. I have had people push me into positions of leadership, whether that's, hey, you're going to preach now, you're going to be the captain of the team, you're going to be the student body president. I didn't go seeking after those positions, but others around me recognized characteristics that they wanted to follow, and so I think God through them moved me into those positions. I think that's been, for me, as I think back, it feels better for me to lean into the humility side of things than the aspiration side of things. And I think I've lost sometimes I need to aspire to something. And sometimes I don't, because it feels like it's not humble. And we have to find somewhere to live in that tension. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat. You don't feel like a leader. You don't think of yourself as a leader. But the truth is that every one of us is called to make disciples, and that's leadership. Whether that's with your own children, with your neighbors, with the people that you work with, We need to live a life that is both questionable and attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you that way? I like how it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
I like the results that I see in your life, but why do you choose that stuff? And I think that's, again, the picture that Paul paints of leaders in the church. It's not a high bar.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to be faithful. It's not that hard to enjoy having people in your home. It's not that hard to not get drunk and not love money, but the result of that is gaining capacity for God to use you to bring beauty and order into a chaotic world. And our world needs that.
Yeah. So how? So also this weekend, you and Joe and Ace and Sue did a family life led a family life workshop this weekend.
Yeah.
Talk for a second about that. Like, how does, like, I'm just gonna pitch you a really easy ball. How does equipping parents and families? How does that help? How does that help bring order? Like, what does that look like?
Well, if a man can't manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church? That's what Paul asked.
Right.
It really discipleship starts at home.
Yeah.
And if we're going to talk about discipleship as the process of someone becoming more like Christ, that's an example of God bringing order out of chaos and
Right.
bringing beauty out of chaos. One of the things I said, I think on Saturday, it was kind of a full weekend, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure when I said what I said, but discipleship requires access to each other's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nowhere that we have more access to each other's lives than in our families, at home. My kids have more access to me than anybody else, except my wife. I have more access, and sometimes it doesn't feel this way, but I have more access to my kids' lives than anybody else.
Yeah.
I know that they have teachers giving them assignments, they have bosses giving them hours to work. But at this point in their lives, I can supersede all of that.
Right.
I can say, no, you're not going to do your homework right now. We need to talk about something else. I can say, no, you're not going to work here. We need to do this instead. Now, I don't play those cards very often. In fact, I don't know if I've ever told my kids, no, you're not working because something else came up. I have told them, make sure that you ask for this time off because this is what's happening then, and you will be participating. Because the discipleship of my kids is more important to me than whatever $9 an hour they're getting or whatever grade they're going to get on the paper. That doesn't mean those things aren't important.
It means you have in your mind what an ordered you have in your mind what an ordered life looks like. So you, in wielding that parental authority, role, humility, whatever phrase we want to utilize there, that's an aspect of bringing order to a chaotic place.
Yeah. One of the things that I've observed over the last couple years as my kids have gotten older is that adults like interacting with my kids. And that to me that's not been an accident. I want my kids to get good grades in school, but school is for a little while.
Yeah.
And then it's over. What I want more from my kids is that they be able to do good work in whatever they're doing. But even that, our lives are much more than the work that we do.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be respected and do a good job at their jobs. I want them to show up the hours that they're supposed to show up and work hard the whole time they're there. And they do that. But they do that because I think the context that we've built in our family is that of we're working for God and He deserves the best. Dakota right now is working at Runza, and they like him there, I think, because he does a good job. Also because he's pretty entertaining. He's a funny kid. But doing a good job at a simple task is only a reflection, I think, of the mentality that we go into that task with.
Yeah.
And in our family, we've wanted to set the expectation that whether it's at school or at work or whatever else we're doing, like Paul said, we're not just working for a man or the man. We're not just working for a paycheck. We are putting forth effort for the sake of Christ. We don't always do that perfectly, but we make an attempt to do that as good as we can. And so discipleship, that leadership starts at home. Yeah. And so on Saturday we talked about how we can disciple our kids at home, disciple our grandkids. We had a good mix of grandparents and parents. We had people whose grandkids live hours and hours away, and so they're kind of grandparenting from a distance. And then we had all the way to people who have about 2-year-olds that are constantly clinging, absolutely dependent on the presence of the parent. And how do we, in all of the spectrum of that situation, how do we disciple our families? And so one of the things that we want to do well here at WestWay is make sure that all the environments that we are in are discipleship environments. And really, there is no other environment that any of us spend time in where we have more access to life than at home, the environment of our home. And so we want to help people make those environments discipling environments.
Yeah, and we have lots of ways that we do that. So the family life workshops, this is our second one. We did one back in October. This one that we just had, and then this weekend I was gone. I was in Dallas. We were at a training. WestWay in September is hosting it's called the Legacy Coalition Grandparenting Summit. It's a national spiritual grandparenting conference. And last year, Ann and I and Joe and Cheryl went to California for this conference. And the whole time it was just like, man, this would be so awesome. How could we get the grandparents at WestWay Christian Church and in Scottsbluff to go to this? And it's just there's just no way. How do you take an entire church of people to a national conference? Yeah. So we were really excited last year when we got home. A few months after we got home, we found out that they were hosting the conference again, but they were going to do a national broadcast. So we applied to be one of the host sites for this broadcast, and we were accepted in that process. And then yesterday we were at a training in Dallas where they were talking about what that whole thing was going to look like, and I'm really excited. It's going to be a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of effort, and it really has a tremendous potential to not only change what we're doing at WestWay in terms of working with grandparents in particular, but to change our community. We know that there are a ton of grandparents in our church body and in our community that are raising their own grandchildren, which presents a whole different set of challenges for those families. So this is really going to be an awesome opportunity to make a difference. And like you said, we have parents and grandparents who have more of an opportunity to make an impact in the lives of their children and grandchildren than you or I ever could.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the way you talked about that a few weeks ago. I think in your communion or offering meditation, what we do here, and this is just across the board, what we do here at WestWay Christian Church, that's not the end all and be all of the Christian experience. We want to come alongside you, whether you're a parent or not a parent, whether you're a grandparent or not a grandparent. We want to come alongside you and really give you tools and equip you to be able to do that. So this conference coming up, there's a link in the show notes. Registration opens on March 1st. We're going to be talking far more about this over the next couple weeks. But I would just really encourage you, if you're a grandparent and you're navigating that space of working with my adult children and their children. So I mean that's where I am right now in my life. This is really going to be an amazing opportunity to learn and grow in your discipleship, and to complement everything else that we've been doing here. So there is nothing that's happening in isolation. It wasn't just, hey, we should host this grandparenting thing. No, we want to do it because it fits who we are and what we're trying to accomplish here. So be on the lookout for that, because it really is all about bringing order to chaos. To come back to what we started with, the role of leaders, the role of parents, grandparents, teachers, is to bring order to the chaos that is this world without order. And we all have a role in that as Christians. So this week we are reading 1 Timothy chapter 4. So I would encourage you to read that when you get the chance this week. I would love it if you would read 1 Timothy chapter 4, if you would read that chapter every day for the rest of the week. There are not many verses. There are 16 verses in 1 Timothy chapter 4. And if you read that every day from this point forward until Sunday, you'll be very well prepped for
every day.
Every day, you'll be very well prepped.
Does that include today, or?
I think there's time to read 16 verses. But I'll leave that up to you. So I would encourage you to read, I'd encourage you to read 1 Timothy chapter 4. That's what we're going to talk about.
Michaela posted last week a picture of the I don't have time to read my Bible starter pack.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
I think there's Netflix on there.
Make lots of reasons to not.
Right.
I don't have time. You have time.
Yep.
If you choose to take it.
Yep. 16 verses.
So do I.
I believe in you. Do this. Hey, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your week. As always, thoughts, questions, ask us, because that's why we're here, to equip you, to help you bring order to your chaotic life, and then you help bring order to our chaotic life.
That would be good.
Yep. Thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day.
See ya.